Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We have a great panel. We're going to talk about gaming and good things. We're going to talk about how gaming is good for you. We have very interesting guests with us today. We have Laura. Hello, Laura. How are you doing?
Hi, Alvaro.
Good to see you. We have Sachin as well.
Hi, Alvaro.
Good. How are you? And we have Joe.
Hello. How's everyone doing?
Good. It's great to have you here, guys. Just before we start, if we can go introduce ourselves a little bit.
So I'm Laura Higgins. I'm the Director of Community Safety and Digital Civility at Roblox. If you haven't heard of Roblox, we are a new way for people to be together, particularly at a time like now where we actually can't be together. And we see it as the future, how people can play and work and learn and socialize and experience things together. Every day we have millions of people around the world having fun with their friends, playing immersive digital experiences on the platform, all of which are created by the Roblox community.
Hi, my name is Sachin. I'm formerly known as Dr. Sachin Shah. I'm a psychiatrist, and I am part of Gaming the Mind, which is a UK-based charity which aims to promote positive mental health within the games playing community, be that through education, through running chill-out rooms at conventions, or through communication of mental health knowledge. It's great to be here.
I'm Joe Donelly. I am a video game journalist and and I have lived experience with suicide. And in 2020, last year, I wrote a narrative non-fiction book called Checkpoint, which explores mental health through experience and also its relationship with video games through experience as well, and the good ways that video games and mental health overlap.
That was great. Thanks a lot, everyone. I just want to start with kind of like a personal anecdote. The game that I play the most in my life is Civilization 4. I go back to it once in a while. When the pandemic started, I went back to Civ 4, really played really a lot. And then I was just thinking, okay, what's going on here? I started hearing from people that people were playing much more, that, during the pandemic, everyone is at home, everyone is using video games. And I was like, okay, there's really something going on here. I remember people telling me, people who have never heard before that they play video games, telling me that they were playing. So I was like, okay, there's really something happening with the lockdown and gaming. And I started researching, and there was really a big boom with gaming. So kind of like my question, I think, is how or why did you think this happened? And yeah, what was kind of like the impact of this? It was, I think people don't see that it was a really huge for the gaming community and for the gaming industry. What we went through last year, right? Sachin, do you want to? Because I remember we were talking about Animal Crossing, for example, and that being one of the games that really helped people through the pandemic. So if you want to tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I know you covered Animal Crossing as a part of your documentary as well on gaming and how people use it to cope. And I'm personally someone who started playing Animal Crossing at the beginning of the pandemic also. I mean, it's the game of the pandemic because it came out just as lockdown was beginning. And I was housed away from home by the NHS because they wanted to keep me working while my household were isolating. So I was in this place where I didn't know anybody and everything was closed. And I was just in a hotel room with nothing else to do. And so Animal Crossing gave me a lot of grounding in terms of giving me a routine, daily things to get on with, and social connection, because I was visiting my friends' islands. I was also discussing with my friends about stork prices and trying to get good stork prices on the stork market. So in terms of the psychological needs our basic psychological needs that Animal Crossing is addressing. It is stuff like giving us a feeling of control over our lives in a time when we don't feel very in control of what's going on, giving us a sense of connection and relatedness to other people at a time when we are so isolated and away from people we know, and giving a sense of accomplishment and achievement, like me being able to build my island and achieve these small tasks every day, which make me feel like I'm getting on with something at a time when we are all stuck at home and maybe feel a bit demotivated.
I'd like to come in if possible. So on Roblox, we've been told it's been a lifeline for families. So we've seen things like around Thanksgiving and Christmas where grandparents couldn't be with their grandchildren and they're meeting within the metaverse that is Roblox, where they're actually able to play games and communicate and chat with each other. I mean, I think it's so important that we acknowledge the huge impact the pandemic's had on everybody. It's ripped families apart. It's taken young people away from their friends, no school, all those normal things that they're used to. And I think being able to provide a safe environment where they can hang out and have a bit of normality with their friends, having fun, but also just the communication side of things. We did a survey last year of around 3,000 teenagers right at the beginning of the pandemic, kind of saying, what's important about your online life right now. And overwhelmingly, they said it's the ability to be able to communicate with my friends and sort of still feel connected.
Yeah. I think just further to what you're saying, Laura, like in terms of what the pandemic brought, like Sachin says as well, the inability to be able to go out and explore in the real world. And one of the things which I realised just kind of organically over playing Grand Theft Auto Online was strangely the game which I threw myself into the PC role-playing side, where it's more that you try and replicate how the real world is by not committing crimes, strangely. But one of the things which I discovered, and I think this is true for a lot of people, is that despite everything that's going on in the real world, or everything that has gone on in the last year or so and continues to go on at the moment, the rules remain the same in online spaces. So not only was it about socialising, in my case it was with strangers, it was just nice to be out there kind of mixing, it was that everything had remained the same. So in a time when there was so much turmoil and so much upheaval, that we had to stay in, for the greater good, and obviously, more than happy to do that, to follow the rules, but to be able to go into worlds where the rules remained the same and they'll remain the same after the pandemic as well, I found real comfort in that as well.
Now, perfect. You were just saying now, Joe, and I think one of the things were, like, as you said before also, Sachin, the sense of being able to go somewhere else, which is much better than the reality that we are living day by day, right? That's something that I heard constantly, and like that you could just go to another world that feels, in a lot of ways, from a psychological point of view, it feels very similar to our real world in some ways. In terms of connection, in terms of like the relationships that we have, do you guys think that, I mean, we interact in virtual worlds in a very similar way?
I can speak for Roblox. One of the things we saw that we thought was absolutely amazing, as I say, everything on the platform is user generated. And we saw young people recreating life experiences that they would have been having in the real world. So having birthday parties in private servers on the platform. We had high schools building out their school in Roblox and having their graduation parties in there. Just real, so innovative, but a way for them to really celebrate and feel like they weren't missing out on those real things. So yeah, I think that's been really important for them.
I actually remember reading a story about Roblox, maybe it was a year ago, about a youngish lad who, I'll just give a content warning, I'm about to discuss suicide here, who had lost their parent to suicide and had decided to make some content on Roblox, which gives out mental health information about suicide. And, it was a way for him to sort of process that himself and express some creativity, and also to help other people to then understand what he'd been through. And I think that's such a powerful medium for people to communicate and get these ideas across.
Thank you for raising that, Alex, who's a young creator who developed that game. We have many examples of people doing that. One of our other creators, Jenny, she's talked about it as being a healing platform where she kind of finds therapy through creating and then sharing those experiences with people. We have a really diverse community as well. So that, LGBTQ plus community, it's a place where they feel safe, where they can talk about their issues and be together and inspire each other in a safe way. So we're providing entertainment experiences as well. So it's not all serious, but definitely I think as we're going through the learning we've had and where we see ourselves in the future, is about, the blur between the online worlds and the offline worlds has never been more blurry. And so the more we can bring those safe experiences and actually, things like, envisaging a class being taught within Roblox. We actually have our company town hall meetings within Roblox. So you just get loads of avatars running around. And I think the possibilities are endless in terms of how we can engage mental health services and physical health services for young people particularly. It's a really good way to do that.
I think that's brilliant just in terms of the way you're talking about like real world services as well. I'm a big football manager player myself, and I know that throughout the pandemic they replaced all their in-game advertising with links to Mind and various other charities, so that not necessarily forcing players down certain routes, but just in case there was anything they needed to say. And when you spoke about the difference or the kind of bloodlines between online and offline, certainly my own experiences throughout the pandemic, I thought playing online games, I don't play Roblox myself, but perhaps Minecraft or Grand Theft Auto Online, as I mentioned, Sea of Thieves or The Sims or whatever, playing those games was a real lifeline to be able to continue socialising. But equally, the offline games, which I really enjoyed, the likes of The Last of Us 2, which painted a kind of doomsday scenario, which was even worse than what we were living through somehow, and games like Demon's Souls, which are like brutally unforgiving, but the sense of achievement of just kind of much as I love spending loads of time with my family, we were all of a sudden spending much more time together. So to be able to escape and just play something on my own in that offline world, I found that really valuable as well.
I know I've seen in a recent survey.
Hello? Yeah.
Sorry, the lag is horrible. I know I've seen in a recent survey that, and this is a market survey, so you take it with a pinch of salt, obviously, but it said that obviously gaming has gone up during the pandemic, and one of the things that initially went up was multiplayer games because people wanted to connect, but more recently there's been an increase in single player game being played. And there were some free text answers, I suppose, where people were explaining why, and they were saying that nowadays they actually just need that immersion. And that is something, aside from those basic psychological needs that games can give us, is a feeling of being somewhere else. And what a time where we need to feel like we're out somewhere else. And for some people, being cramped up at home is a very small space. And some people, I live in London, don't have gardens. They don't have much space to explore. They might live in shared accommodation, and so they're stuck in their rooms. And so games can be a vital outlet. I know Breath of the Wild was a big one for me at the beginning of the pandemic, of just a game where you can go out and anywhere you can see on the map, you can pretty much get to. And it's such a freeing feeling.
Can I just also ask you guys about, because if we were talking about mental health and we're talking about how engaging games are emotionally, and I remember when I was doing my doc, I was also thinking about, well, there is also huge responsibility with this in a way from both the gaming industry, creators. I remember, Joe, we were speaking about Actual Sunlight, which was as a game that pretty well. So I just wanted to kind of like ask out there, there is responsibility here, right? And how do we deal with that, with the fact that games are so powerful emotionally?
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned Actual Sunlight. That's I think it's a fantastic game. I've spoke to you in the documentary about it, and I've spoken about it loads in my career as a journalist, and even just to friends and family. It's a game by Will O'Neill about a kind of everyday man who gets trapped in the monotony of his life, and he struggles to do the kind of day-to-day stuff in his 9 to 5, and he really struggles with depression and suicide. And there's some really somber, really kind of interpersonal themes, but relatable themes. And it was a game which really helped me in the aftermath of my uncle's suicide, which is what I write about in my book and what I speak about often when I'm talking about video games and mental health. Will O'Neill, front and centre, the game's developer, makes it clear that he's not a mental health professional, but nevertheless, the game that you're playing, there are the appropriate content warnings, but it's pretty grim at times. It is pretty somber, and it's very real, albeit made in RPG Maker. So it looks cutesy, it looks little sprites walking about the screen, but the subject matter is really quite heavy. And as someone who has written about mental health, but is not a mental health professional, again, I make that very clear whenever I'm speaking, even in things like this, or if I'm writing about games and mental health. It's just been mindful of the fact that. For me, it's video games are important. They're an invaluable tool for relaying information and as an educational tool. But the rest of your life is equally as important. Nothing should suffer in that process. And I think as someone who's been banging the drum about the positivity of video games in the last year, particularly since we went into lockdown last year, and obviously on and off up and down the country since, is that we need to be mindful of people who may have developed new habits in games. Whilst I've been very encouraging of friends and family to, you should try this game, or you should pick up gaming again. If people are in new routines, it's very important that they maintain a balance even as we start to come out of lockdown, because new habits which could encroach on the rest of life come up as well. So it's just been, for me, again, as someone who doesn't have professional background, is just being very upfront about that and making sure that people understand that video games should be, like anything, should be enjoyed, but it shouldn't take over any other aspect of life.
Yeah, I think for us, absolutely, I would echo that. It has both positive and negative impact, and there needs to be a really good balance. I think our responsibility as a platform is really important, and I know there's a huge kind of scrutiny on all platforms coming in with the online harms regulation and the age-appropriate design code, for example. Certainly for us, our users' numbers have gone up massively. We were already growing, and then the pandemic happened. So we have about 36 million players on average every day. And with that, there is a lot of responsibility. So it's about making sure that all the things we put in to protect the users and the community are adequate and actually aspiring to be innovative and always kind of iterating on things to make them as good as they can be. Working in partnership with other platforms has really, really grown, I think. It was already something that we were seeing emerge with initiatives like the Fair Play Alliance and Raising Good Gamers and these sorts of things. But I think actually there's been so much solidarity between everyone going, we have this same community. We all feel this huge duty to keep everyone safe, to make sure that they're still having a good time. And so there's an awful lot of idea sharing and sharing tools even, which I think is wonderful. And I just really hope that post-pandemic, we can continue that kind of really positive stuff that's happening, because I think we're charging forwards and leading the way with managing a lot of these issues.
I think in terms of the content warnings that Joe was mentioning, I think that's just so important. In terms of various game makers have approached us to look at the mental health content in their games and to sort of get an idea of if it's properly representational or if it's perhaps got triggering content. I don't like using that word, but upsetting content, let's say. And I do come to the conclusion usually that if it's artistically important to have your game the way it is, then that shouldn't be interrupted. But I will tell you, this might be upsetting or not. What's most important is to warn the player beforehand, okay, this is what's coming up in the game, and, make a judgment decision as to whether you're in the right space of mind to deal with that right now. And so there's various games. One of the most controversial ones is called Doki Doki Literature Club, which is a popular visual novel, but contains some very upsetting scenes, but also gives you an upfront warning at the beginning of the game. Now, as far as the things mentioned about online safety, I think that goes beyond games. I think all online services, games or YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or Snapchat or TikTok, need to protect their users from abuse and harassment, and they need to protect their users' privacy and not misuse their users' data, which when we get to younger users is really important because they can't really agree to have their data be used. But I want to see it done in a way that values the user's privacy, because some countries have gone in a very far decision to protect their users by bringing in real ID registration, like you have to register with your real name, or face recognition registration so they know who's playing. And we should be vigilant that we don't go in that direction in an attempt to protect users.
I just wanted to mention when I was doing my research for the documentary, I was literally going through a lot of research and a lot of like studies about gaming and mental health, and I could basically see kind of like almost two sides, like people saying it's good, people saying it's bad. And I'm just kind of like, I think the question I want to make, it's kind of like, is it possible to actually prove that games can be good for mental health, or is that even the question to ask?
Yeah, I would definitely say so.
Who wants to go?
Sorry, that the media have such a huge responsibility here. Just this week, despite it being London Games Festival and all these amazing things going on, we're still seeing good news stories, but with really negative news headlines. We did a survey, again, we do quite a lot of research, with parents a couple of years ago, and we asked them, like, what was their perception of games? And I think it was overwhelming. They were like, games are scary, we're not sure about our kids playing them. The same amount actually said they could see opportunity of their kids playing games. But then when we asked them where they were getting this fear from, it wasn't lived experience. It wasn't people they knew who'd had a bad time. It was stuff they were reading or hearing about in the media. And so I think if we can work with them around some of that, like research is so important, you know, the stuff that we've had this year coming out around, you know, what was happening on Animal Crossing and the positive things that happen. But there really is so much scaremongering. There is even a lot of research, unfortunately, that isn't kind of peer reviewed, but it gets circulated. That is, you know, when you actually dig into it, it doesn't really tell us much. So I think it would be difficult for us to prove that games are good in the same way, but it's definitely something I want to see more focus on. We really need proper, decent research in this stuff.
I would echo Laura that research isn't at the high quality that it needs to be, although that's coming in now. Like one paper that you're probably well aware of because it was covered in the media was Andrew Shabilsky's team's research paper, which used pre-registration and open data. So that basically makes sure that you can't come to a conclusion after you've collected the data. And so you're telling people what you're looking for, and then you look for it. And it had input from the video games industry, which is great because the video games industry should be more open with their data so we can see what's going on. What it found was probably not as important. It was what it didn't find. And what it didn't find was a negative correlation between playing games and bad, you know, and well-being. So playing more games didn't make you worse off. So there's a study which, you know, at least didn't find that. It is possible to find that games are good for well-being. I just don't think that sort of evidence has come out yet. You'd want some sort of a longitudinal study which starts off at one point, measures game playing, and then sees how people are doing at another point. I have seen some data like that, actually, such as showing that games don't precipitate ADHD, for example, in a multi-year study. But that's not something that we've got a lot of yet.
I think purely from a perspective, again, as someone who's not an academic, I'm not a researcher. I mean, I have researched articles or when I was writing my book, but in the short term, I think that whilst it would be brilliant to have empirical data or something that resembled that, just to look and say, yes, you know, X, Y, or Z helps and X, Y, or Z doesn't. For me, as someone who, again, when I speak about my own experience with mental health in games, it's about, in the short term, the stories which we have from individuals. I mean, you mentioned some of the wonderful stories that are coming out of Roblox. I know someone who has been on strike throughout the pandemic, which is going on strike at any time is precarious, obviously doing it in a pandemic when people are losing their jobs left, right and centre. But he discovered gaming, or rediscovered gaming, and has fallen in love with The Last of Us and The Last of Us 2. People that have suffered injuries and have been using the time to, because they can't get out physically, this is before the pandemic, to be using online worlds to do very much similar to what people have been doing in the last year. So just to see more of those stories to kind of combat some of the rubbish that you see in the red tops and stuff that are really counterproductive in the message that I believe as a video game advocate, but the good that video games are doing. So for me, just to kind of, before we can get to, it would be amazing to have all the studies, but in the meantime, just hearing more and more stories of people that did find that video games helped them through a specific time in their life.
Well, do you know the one thing we haven't really touched on is we've talked about the kind of therapeutic elements, we've talked about the social elements. Games are fun. Like you were saying earlier, Joe, about its escapism, but the whole point is just to chill and de-stress and have something that's yours and is silly. Just that escapism. And I think that's really valuable. And we know, research or not, that actually is just good for us.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think that hits on this the question of, is it an important question to ask? And not necessarily is it an important question to ask. For example, if you know in your heart that reading books is good for your stress, why do you need to wait for research to come out that proves that that is the case? That's gatekeeping from the scientific community. If you know what works for you, and sometimes the thing that will work best for you is the thing that you know you will do. So if games are good for you and you know it, then that's probably the answer you're looking for. And you just have to engage with it in a safe way, which most people do.
That kind of feeds into the
other thing is just that it distracts also. These stories distract from what we know is harmful to people's mental health. So the previous president of the Royal College of Psychiatrists commented on the research that we have on games today. And he said, okay, so basically where we're at now in terms of the impact of games is that maybe we know that video games have a small impact on mental health, whereas we definitely know that poverty and austerity, reduction in services, malnutrition, education being cut back, that all definitely has a massive impact on mental health. So the more that people cover video games as this dangerous thing, the more we're distracting ourselves from stuff we know is bad.
True. Yeah. Not quite anywhere near as profound as what you were saying there, Sachin, but just in terms of when you were saying about if you know that reading helps you, for example, or if you know that, maybe chilling with Netflix helps you mentally, I think that can extend to games as well. I know a lot of people are hard on themselves for the pile of shame because they've not got to all the newest releases in any given year. If you play anything, FIFA, Football Manager, Call of Duty, Dark Souls, Animal Crossing, Breath of the Wild, whatever it is, even if you've played it 100 times, if it makes you feel good, if it chills you out, if it lets you have that little piece of escapism, even within the medium of video games, then do it. If it makes you feel nice, and it doesn't matter if you've got other games that you could be playing, if there's a game which makes you feel comfortable, safe, relaxed, then I say go for that as well.
That'll be Mario 64 then.
Guys, I just wanted to pick up on something that Laura was saying, and I guess media and how games are portrayed, and I guess the fact that we are having this conversation means that there's still a lot to work on, and there's still kind of like a lot to understand about gaming. But do you think perceptions are changing? Do you think gaming is being seen more in a more positive light, and being kind of like accepted as a kind of like a complex medium and art form? Do you think that's changing?
I'll start if you like. There are some, yes, a little bit. It's shifting tiny bit, but I worry it's very fragile and it could very easily go back the other way. So we all have responsibility to keep telling those good news stories, like Jay said. Because obviously there's a huge amount of game design and building, and we teach kids to code with Roblox. So I'm seeing schools actually seeing it as a genuinely beneficial thing to introduce into their curriculum and using other platforms as well. So that's really good, and that gives some credibility, and that helps parents feel a bit more reassured with it. So that's fantastic. But, UK have obviously just brought out the big reports around finance. Our industry in the UK is worth £7 billion. Most people wouldn't believe that if you told them, So why is that not on the front page? Like, why is this? We're talking about fishing. That's hugely important, of course, but actually the video game industry is also hugely important. And I think, we really need to break down some of those barriers about just how huge the workforce is. It's not just about the impact of the playing games, but actually as an industry, just how important and how, it should be up there along with any other big industry.
Another thing I wanted to ask. We were talking before about well-being, mental health, and some games that are really that touch in very, very deep in some aspects of well-being. And I wanted to ask: is it a way to kind of like learn things inside games that could be applied in real world in terms of well-being, mental health? I guess they are, but like, if you guys could give me, if you can think some example of that, or kind of like, can we learn emotionally from gaming examples?
I'm not sure necessarily. Well, emotionally, there's definitely emotions involved, but throughout when I was writing Checkpoint, the games which I kind of focused on, one of them was Actual Sunlight, which we discussed before, and very personally, I was able to relate to the scenarios which the protagonist, or you lead the protagonist through. And one of the things which I speak about in the book, and a few of the people that contributed as well speak about, is the persuasive and interactive nature of games, and how whilst other forms of perhaps more traditional media like television or books or whatever are invaluable tools for educating, the fact that you need to put yourself into video games, the fact that you control the character, therefore you get more from it because you're putting yourself in that situation. I definitely think that it can help people learn. Another game which I focus on in the book, which I really enjoy, is Never Ending Nightmares by Matt Gildenbach, which is another indie game which explores OCD, and more specifically Matt, the developer's OCD. And I think I was guilty of this as well. Like, I didn't really know too much about obsessive compulsive disorder until playing this game. I thought it was just about an obsession with, organising your desk or tidying your house and things like that, which I know are traits of OCD, but Matt's OCD manifested in images of self-harm. And again, his game, with the appropriate content warnings, in a kind of monochromatic, illustrated animation. And it's like a horror game as well, so it kind of visits his experiences in OCD, and I had no idea that this was even possible through OCD. Again, so someone who's just approaching games as a player, to be able to play these very specific, very idiosyncratic experiences, yet if you go into the Steam comments, there's so many people that can relate to this, who obviously knew that this was something which was part of certain people that have got OCD who are experiencing something similar themselves. So I very much believe that the games which are tackling those themes head on can certainly educate. And I learned so much throughout the process of researching and writing my book, and of course playing those games as well.
It's certainly possible to learn stuff through games. I mean, there's literal examples of people who have learned to fly using flight simulators, or learned to race using Gran Turismo, and then transferred those skills to the real world. And so I don't see why there's any difference between a game and any other medium in terms of imparting knowledge. And again, as I say, you might want to meet people where they're at. Like, the thing that you might learn best from is the thing that you engage with the most. I saw an article recently about sex education with younger people, because sex education is a difficult thing to set up, and especially in our sort of pandemic world now. And it takes money, and it takes organization, and it takes a motivated class, right? But meanwhile, maybe video games are the way to deliver it, and there's numerous companies who are trying to do that. And within the realm of mental health, Hellblade, to tack on to Joe's excellent examples, is a game which people keep on writing about and tweeting about as, I've just played this game, I didn't realize that Psychosis was like this. Give or take whether Hellblade is an amazing example of Psychosis or not, but people are playing the game and coming away with some form of empathy towards people with psychotic symptoms that maybe they didn't previously have. Now, to put a scientific bent on it, again, I've not seen a study which shows that video games increase empathy and make it stick. Like 1 year down the line, is it any different? But that's not to say that the potential isn't there, because clearly games can change what's in your mind and move you.
Yeah. I think speaking a little bit more abstract in terms of what people can learn from games as well is one of the things which I found the most interesting and heartwarming as a male who grew up in the west coast of Scotland, grew up in Glasgow, where the kind of stiff upper lip Britishness is really quite prevalent, especially amongst guys. And it needs to change for years and years and years. I'm nearly 35 myself, and it's certainly the same when I was younger. I think newer generations are getting better about speaking, particularly males. But when I started writing about video games and mental health, and I've been pretty candid about some of the struggles I've had seeking professional help on courses of medication, but I had friends private messaging me on social media or whatever, even just via text. And these are guys which I'm playing football with midweek in normal circumstances. I'm seeing them in the pub on a Saturday, and just kind of private me saying, read your article. I've actually been seeing a psychologist for 6 months now. I'd love to see those conversations take place face to face in the pub in front of everybody. But the fact that they could happen, even privately, okay, it's maybe not where we want to be, at the end of that line, but it is opening doors. And I feel that, I could have been writing about anything. It could have been any other writer, but it was me writing about video games, and they were able to say, oh, cool, here's, I understand what a video game is. Here's what Joe's saying. And then, saying, I've actually been going through the same thing. And it's a shame that they couldn't be more open about it. But using video games in that manner, I found it really refreshing and really enlightening as well.
It's amazing though. It's still a start. It's a step in the right direction. We had a lot of experiences. Like Roblox is totally global. And of course, one of the things it does is bring together kids from different parts of the world, from Mexico and Brazil and Japan. And we hear all the time from kids and teens where they're like, I've got this friend on the other side of the world. They're teaching me some of their language. They talk to me about what it's like at their school. I'm learning about what it's like in their home life. They're sharing these things. And so that's really a beautiful leveler. But there are certain world events we've seen over the last couple of years, actually, during the Black Lives Matter. We have these amazing, diverse, passionate, fiery community quite often. And of course, they are wanting to talk about these real world issues in a safe way on the platform. But they were creating avatar outfits that were Black Lives Matter. They're going and they're demonstrating within games, and they really wanted a voice. And we actually saw one example, a young lady called Garvey, who's a young developer on the platform. She was noticing a lot of the avatars were like making their skin a bit darker and perhaps doing their hair differently. And so she kind of started talking to these young people, and she's like, actually, that's slightly offensive. But if you do want to be an ally, there are better ways that you can do it. Here's how you can stand up and help us and support us and spread these positive messages. And, these are 12-year-olds. It's so important that they're having those conversations and doing those things at that age. So I agree with you, Sachin, to your point. Yes, we're not sure how long that empathy and that learning goes. But if we keep repeating it and it keeps happening, then hopefully there's a real sort of positivity that it would just keep building.
Yeah. And anything that increases empathy, right? Talking to people, breaking down those barriers. Why wouldn't it work in video games? That's just seems common sense to me. And again, you're right. Why do we need to wait for a scientific paper to tell us that? And the other thing is, you talk about, being able to put yourself in the shoes of the character. And that's so important for people who are doing identity exploration or identity formation, trying to work out who they are as people. And a recent paper on trans kids giving their opinions on what a game should be. They all said, this game, games that we play should have trans representation because that's what we want to be within games. But the other thing that's important is for people who want to just, explore other identities, or don't necessarily want to, but end up exploring other identities. If you play as someone who just isn't from the same background as you, we talk about how stigma and discrimination can be reduced just by meeting someone from another group, right? Well, just think about how that could also be reduced by playing as someone from another group. And that can have a powerful effect too.
I just want to kind of just keep just touch on that you just mentioned now, Sachin, because I think that that's so important. I've come through that as well. I've seen that, and the fact that a game like The Last of Us 2 has been so huge, it's kind of like reflecting what you're saying right now.
Your documentary had a great interview with someone who identified with Last of Us and its gay representation or lesbian representation, let's say. And I think it's such a kick-ass game. I'm not saying I necessarily liked Ellie in The Last of Us 2. I thought she took a bit of a dark turn, but such a badass character who went out on revenge, and she's gay, and most of the characters take that in their stride in this post-apocalyptic world. It's also a trans character who, again, I have to say there's been some criticism as to how that trans character was handled, but as a character, he was so cool. Loved him. And so, yeah, just a great game, a AAA game, biggest selling game of that year, huge awards that it's won. I think it won some BAFTAs too. And it's got this great LGBT representation.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things with us having a user-generated avatar system. So we do have quite a few trans kids on the platform. They can be whoever they want to be. They can literally represent themselves. They can change. They can find what fits, what they're comfortable with. You can literally be whoever you want to. And again, I'm really lucky. A big part of my job is spending time with the community and listening to them and telling their stories. And it's really, really powerful. One of our Quasar, who is one of our, again, a British developer, he was so badly bullied in real life for years, physically assaulted, just had a terrible time because he was different. And he basically created his avatar as him. And it just is one of the most beloved characters within Roblox. He actually got recognized at a theme park in the real world because they were like, oh my God, it's you in the flesh. And isn't that just amazing for him to kind of fight back on that? It's good to be different and actually for it to be celebrated. So there's a huge amount of power. And I know for some people, they're not brave enough to go that step, but just to allow people to, feel safe, to try things out, to figure out who they are and have fun while doing it. It's a really good thing.
I don't know if I'm out. Okay, can you guys hear me? Okay. Okay. I just wanted to go just back to the Last of Us 2. I think it's I just heard so many people talking about this game, and you were just mentioning also, Sachin, the representation, but not only that, like the fact that you were talking about Ellie, and she's a very traumatized character. And a lot of people playing through her, they were. I was told that a lot of people told me that they were dealing. It helped them dealing with some of the trauma that they had. So my question is, you see games like this, The Last of Us 2, which are huge, but they're really, really complex. They're dealing with really, really complex issues. Does this mean that gaming are going like more in the direction of like, are we able to look deeper into our souls through game now? Is gaming changing to a more complex art form?
Yeah, I only need to look to yesterday's BAFTAs, which had a beyond gaming, beyond entertainment category. So games which were not just about having fun, and maybe not even about having fun at all. So games like Dreams, which is about creativity, Before I Forget, which is about understanding the perspective of someone with dementia. The Last of Us Part 2, as you mentioned, was in that. Spiritfarer, which is meant to teach, well, not meant to teach us, but it does teach us about grief, dying, and being okay with dying. And Tell Me Why, which covered issues of gender, trans issues, and issues of mental illness. So games are stretching beyond, and I don't think they ever purely had this remit, but they're stretching beyond the remit that people have labeled it as, of just being an entertaining pastime. I just saw a Guardian article a few days ago saying, as Laura mentioned, that the video games industry is booming. And the Guardian said, oh, it's because people want to alleviate boredom in their headline. Yeah. Oh, it's not just that. There's so many things that games help us address. And even if you're not going in there for a good time, you might be moved in some way. I did not enjoy the majority of Last of Us Part 2. It made me do some things that made me feel absolutely horrible.
I think the industry's kind of like a little bit caught at times with that, are video games art has been a useless question, which has been about certainly in the 10 years which I've been writing about video games on the journalism side of things. I think the Guardian, the article which you mentioned, Sachin, that kind of headline is it's ridiculous in this day and age. It's tedious, it's frustrating. I think that if people want to use video games to relieve boredom, that's fine. I don't think that, and this goes back to the argument earlier on in the conversation, or the suggestion that you should play games that you enjoy, and that video games are fun. If you come in from work after a hard day and you want to just kick back and play Fortnite or Call of Duty or FIFA and switch off and do that to alleviate boredom, that's absolutely fine. But if you are seeking something a little bit deeper, like all the great games that Sachin mentioned there, then they are there. And I think that it's about raising the profile. For me, it's about raising the profile of awareness. Some of the indie games which I mentioned before, some other games like Papo and Yo, which is 2013, so it's a little bit older now, but it explores alcohol abuse. Depression Quest by Zoe Quinn was another one, which is a narrative game which deals with depression. And it's the thought that even people who are interested in video games aren't necessarily always aware that these games exist. And I've made this point before about if you take any other medium, if you take books and someone hasn't heard of a specific book, be it non-fiction or fiction, if you tell them, well, this book exists, it's kind of in the general kind of psyche that people go, they just assume that it exists if you tell them. Whereas if someone was to say, well, there's this video game which deals with trans issues, or this game that deals with the difficulties of coming out as gay, or the game that deals with mental health issues, people are quite often shocked. Oh, I didn't realise, I thought video games were just about football or war games and stuff. And I think changing that perception is really important as well, where people go, yeah, that's cool, I've never heard of that, how can I play it? As opposed to, oh, I didn't realise that video games did that. I suppose it's just broadening the discourse in some way.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing it more and more. Like Concrete Genie really resonated with me. I've got a teenage kid. He's really into art and skateboarding and all the things that are in it. But the beautiful way that they tackle bullying, it's such an age-appropriate way, so non-preachy. And the conversations we had afterwards, where he was really like, that really hurt, I want to talk about it. I've seen that happen with my friends. And it's just like the power of those kind of conversations that come out of games when it's done well. I think that's the only bit we have to be mindful when we're talking about some of these really tricky subjects. Mostly they're done really well. I want to carry on seeing input from mental health services. I know that there's a lot of work going on in that area, but yeah, as long as people are taking it responsibly and checking that they're not putting people at any risk of harm, then I think the more that we can do in that and opening those conversations. Joe, you said it yourself earlier about how hard it is to just push that bit more, to normalize these discussions. Yeah. If it is through games, then let's do that. Let's really embrace it.
Perfect. Great. Guys, I think we've covered a lot of stuff already. So I'm not sure if we can kind of like, I just wanted to mention, maybe to start wrapping up. One of the things that I really liked reading in a book about gaming was that maybe a question is not if games are good or bad, but how they make you feel. And if they make you feel good, then there's basically that's your answer. So yeah, I don't know if you guys wanted to kind of like do kind of like just last comments.
Yeah, so I think, the power of games is really important. So we need to shout about the good stuff. We need to make sure people know that they're out there as a resource and as an experience and as fun and as a place where they can hang out with their friends. We need to, just keep raising the good, keep being creative with what we're doing and keep pushing boundaries and trying new things. And enjoy what it is that we do. We're also lucky to work in this industry and around this industry, and I think we should celebrate it.
Yeah, I think kind of just further to what you were saying, Laura, just about people getting involved with games as well. And my oldest daughter's 2.5 now, so she's not quite playing any games at any level. I quite often sit the control pad in front of her and she bashes through Sonic Mania just by hitting all the buttons at once. And again, I always joke saying she's already better than me. But one thing which I have discovered a lot of, again, just as someone as an advocate for video games and as a parent and as someone who loves video games, is some of my friends who have got kids, and like you'd said before, Laura, about maybe being a little bit more scared of what video games are. And in the last year, because there's been more downtime, we've been forced outside for a lot of the last 12 months. Just addressing those concerns, like just if you're scared that perhaps your children are a little older than mine, but if you're scared that your pre-teen or teenager is playing too much Fortnite and you worry what's happening, you've got every right as a parent to be worried that who they're mixing with online, like Sachin said, online in any spectrum, any medium, be it video games or anywhere else in social media. I mean, there are dangers. But as a parent, just take that time to sit down. Maybe if they'll allow you to, just sit in and play half an hour of Fortnite. If they don't allow you to, you're the parent, and remember that as you're doing it. Learn what's happening, learn the wonderful worlds, if that's in Minecraft or Fortnite or Roblox. And I think by experiencing it with your kids, I think that will definitely pare back some of the terror or the misconstrued terror that you've got about video games, and that plays into just really promoting the medium and all the good that it does as well.
I have to just jump on that point. So I have first-hand experience of what that feels like, get my son to show me what his world in Fortnite was really like. And it basically taught me a lot about my son, which is that he really enjoyed throwing me out of a window repeatedly.
In a place where it's safe to do so. Not in the real world, but as long as it's happening in Fortnite.
Yeah, I personally, for me, think that video games are great. I wouldn't play them otherwise as much as I do. Even during this pandemic, I've relied a lot on games like Final Fantasy XIV to give me a sense of online space and connection to other people, even though I don't necessarily play with them, but I just like seeing other people around. And the game's community can be great, so I like going on Twitch and having a feeling of other people being around. So that's a personal decision. I don't think that science is necessarily going to come to a decision for you. And I think that's a good place to sort of be as a parent or deciding for yourself, is just to, as both of you said, is to be educated on those matters, and the industry needs to do a lot to educate people as well, and then make that decision for yourself or for your kids. And a lot of these times, it's more a moral decision than it is a scientific decision. So I played GTA from a young age, below the age that it's sort of labeled as, and that's just a moral decision that my parents came to. But if you in your heart feel that your child is not ready for GTA, that's the decision you've got to make for them. The other thing just to mention about morals is, again, I don't think violence makes other people violent, but I do think the industry needs to reckon with the morals of the violence in their games, or just the morals in their games. Do we really want games about war crimes? Do we really want games that can allow people to beat up suffragettes, like in Red Dead Redemption 2? I just need to think about sort of the messages that games are sending, but that is more a moral question than it is, say, a psychological question.
I think I was kicked out. Hello. I think I was kicked out by my
right.
Wi-Fi, which is really bad. But anyway, I just wanted to say thank you very much, Laura, Joe, Sachin. It's been great. I mean, this conversation is to happen, no? And I think it's great to just be able to reflect the positivities of gaming. Okay, there's a delay, so now you're laughing. Something I said before. Anyway, I just wanted to thank you very much for joining, and yeah, let's keep the conversation going. I think that's what needs to happen.
Yeah. Thank you.